She did everything right. She signed the contract, paid every fee, built 7 locations from scratch, and turned a struggling territory into the most profitable region in the entire network. And the moment she became too valuable, the moment her zip codes became too desirable, the corporate office decided she was in the way. What they didn't know is that Lynn Porter had been keeping records every single month for 12 years. This is the franchise.
I'm sitting at my kitchen table as I tell you this. It's the same table where I signed the contract 12 years ago. Dennis had put a bottle of champagne in the fridge because he thought it was going to be a celebration. I remember holding the pen and thinking, this is it. We're actually going to do this. I was 40 years old. Dennis was 53 and had just retired after 22 years at Meridian Logistics. He never complained about a single day of work in his life. The kind of man who wakes up at 5 in the morning without an alarm because he feels like he has obligations to meet. The kind of man who keeps receipts for everything. His retirement savings were $242,000. We put $188,000 of that into this. Let that number sit for a second. $188,000. 22 years of getting up before the sun, and he handed it to me without blinking, because he believed in what we were building. The franchise was called Bright Path Cleaning Solutions. Not glamorous, didn't sell technology or the future or some revolutionary idea. It sold cleaning, commercial and residential premium cleaning services for the Atlanta market, corporate offices, medical centers, high-end properties. The regional representative's name was Greg Paulson. Well-groomed hair, navy suit, firm handshake. He showed me the numbers from 3 franchisees in Ohio and said, Lynn, the people who succeed in this business are the ones who aren't afraid to work. You are clearly one of them. I felt seen. I should have asked myself why he needed to tell me that. The contract was 47 pages. I read every single one. Or I thought I did. The entry fee was $108,000. Monthly royalties of 6% on gross revenue. Regional marketing fund fee of 2%. Exclusive territory. 6 zip codes in North Atlanta. Exclusive territory. Remember that phrase. It comes back later. I signed on the last page. Dennis opened the champagne, and I cried. Not from sadness, from relief. Finally something that was ours. Nobody tells you what the first 6 months of a franchise actually look like. They sell you on the system, the support, the recognized brand. What they don't tell you is that you're going to be cleaning a corporate office bathroom at 11 o'clock at night with your bare hands because the crew you hired didn't show up and the client already sent a text saying the contract is at risk. I did that with my own hands, with Dennis helping me because he never once let me carry anything alone. We had 2 employees and a van. Dennis woke up with me at 4:30 every morning to run the routes before I went to sales meetings. He never asked to be paid for it. He said, Lynn, this is ours. I'm not working for you. I'm working with you. Every time he said that, I felt a weight in my chest that I couldn't name yet. Now I know what it was. It was gratitude and fear mixed together. In 2014, I landed my first real commercial contract, the Northside Medical Plaza. 42 offices, 2-year contract, renewable. I remember the phone call. I was in a Walmart parking lot, buying supplies on a credit card because our operating account was $300 in the negative. When the plaza manager said, "You got it, Lynn," I had to hang up before responding because I was crying too hard to speak. I called Dennis. He was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he said, I knew. I always knew. In 2015, I hired Maria Santos as operations supervisor. Maria had come from Brazil 8 years earlier, worked harder than anyone I'd ever met, and had a standard of cleanliness I had never seen before. She became my second in command, and eventually my friend. In 2016, I expanded into a second territory, another $140,000. Another draw from Dennis's retirement savings. He signed without hesitating. I looked at him and said, "What if it doesn't work?" He said, "Then we start over, but it's going to work." By 2018, 7 locations operating, 43 employees, annual gross revenue of $2,100,000, net margin of 19% after royalties and fees, solid for the industry. In 2019, BrightPath put me on stage at their annual showcase in Las Vegas as Southeast Model franchisee. They gave me an acrylic trophy and took photos for the internal newsletter. Greg Paulson hugged me in front of everyone and said, "Lynn, you are exactly what this network represents." I felt proud. I should have felt alarmed. I was at my second location on Peachtree Road, going over the monthly reports with Maria, when my phone buzzed. Nashville, Tennessee. BrightPath Corporate. It wasn't Greg Paulson. It was a voice I'd never heard before. "Ms. Porter, this is Sandra Keel, Vice President of Network Development at BrightPath. We'd like to schedule a meeting for the 28th to discuss your territory contract renewal." Renewal. My original contract expired in March of 2025, 5 months away. "Of course," I said. "I look forward to it." I hung up. Maria was watching me. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. But something in Sandra Keel's voice had sounded wrong. Too dry, too formal. Like someone who had already made a decision and was just completing a procedure. I went home, sat at this kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I spent 3 hours reading that 47-page contract for the second time in my life. And on page 31, I found it. Clause 14.7b. Upon expiration of the initial term, franchisor reserves the right to renegotiate territorial boundaries based on network development needs, market performance assessments, and strategic expansion objectives at its sole discretion. Plain translation. At the end of the contract, BrightPath could redraw my territory or eliminate it entirely, however they chose. No mandatory compensation, no guaranteed right of first refusal. I had built $2 million in annual revenue in their zip codes, and they could just take it back. My hands were cold, not shaking. Cold. The kind of cold that comes when you understand something you should have understood a long time ago. "Dennis!" I called out. He came from the living room, looked at my face, sat down next to me without asking a single question. I turned the laptop so he could see clause 14.7b. He read it twice, then looked at me. "How much time do we have?" he asked. 5 months, I said. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you need?" Not, "What are we going to do?" Not, "How did you let this happen?" "What do you need?" That is the man I chose. They thought I was going to sign. They didn't know what I had saved. When I got back from Nashville, Dennis was waiting in the kitchen. He didn't ask how it went. He looked at my face and said, "Coffee or whiskey?" "Coffee," I said. "There's still work to do." I sat down, opened my folder, and put on the table what I had brought to that meeting without using. 12 black notebooks. 1 per year, going back to March of 2013. Every royalty payment, every marketing fee, every audit BrightPath ran on my locations. Every email from Greg Paulson promising preferential renewal, every phone call with corporate, logged by date and time. Dennis looked at the stack. "You kept all of this," he said. I grew up with a father who said, "If it's not written down, it didn't happen," I told him. I never forgot that. In the 3 weeks after Nashville, I didn't sleep more than 5 hours a night. I went to work every morning, visited the locations, talked to Maria and my team like nothing was happening. Because for them, nothing was. Not yet. At night, I sat at this table. I put everything into a spreadsheet, 12 years of data, and that's when the numbers started telling a different story than the one BrightPath had been telling me. The regional marketing fund fee, 2% of my gross revenue, every single month, for 12 years. I added it up, $386,000, paid by me into that fund over the life of the contract. The contract said those funds would be used for, and I'm reading this directly, regional marketing campaigns that benefit franchisees within the corresponding territory. But I remembered something. In 2019, 2020, and 2021, I had asked corporate 3 separate times for reports showing how that money was being applied in my region. 3 times. The responses were vague, incomplete, or simply never came. I had the emails, every single one, archived. I went back through the notebooks from that period. There were my notes from the phone calls, dates, names, promises that were never put in writing. And then I found something I had written down in June of 2022 and completely forgotten about. A conversation with Patrice Dawson, a franchisee out of Birmingham, Alabama. Patrice had 12 locations, had been in the network as long as I had, and we'd gotten to know each other at a regional event back in 2018. In June of 2022, Patrice had called me frustrated. Lynn, are you getting any marketing materials from BrightPath for your region? Because I haven't seen anything here in months. I had written, Patrice D., Birmingham, no return on regional marketing materials. Follow up with corporate. I never followed up. I was too busy running 7 locations. Now I needed to call Patrice. It was 11:40 at night when I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. She wasn't sleeping either. Lynn, it's been a while. It has, I said. Patrice, when does your contract expire? Short silence. February, she said. Why? Because mine expires in March. And in October, they called me to Nashville and offered me $92,000 to walk away. Another silence. Longer this time. My God, Patrice said quietly. Lynn, they called me in September. Offered me $112,000. I still haven't signed because my husband said wait. I closed my eyes. 2 territories. 2 of the highest performing franchisees in the Southeast. Contracts expiring 2 months apart. That was not a coincidence. That was a strategy. Do you have your records? I asked. I have everything, she said. Spreadsheets, emails, contracts, all of it. Patrice, I said. Don't sign anything. I need to tell you what I found. The name I needed didn't come from any corporate referral list. It came from Maria Santos. She had a cousin indicator who worked at a law firm that specialized in franchise litigation. The cousin talked to the partner. The partner was Raymond Stokes, 58 years old, silver hair, tie always slightly loosened. The kind of attorney who looks like he's heard everything and still listens to you like it's the first time. I walked into his office with 12 notebooks in a canvas bag, put everything on his desk. He spent 40 minutes reading in complete silence, made notes on a yellow legal pad, didn't interrupt once. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, Ms. Porter, do you know what the FTC franchise rule is? The basics, I said. The FTC requires franchisors to provide a complete and accurate franchise disclosure document prior to signing. That includes how regional marketing funds are collected and applied. He tapped the notebook he'd been reading. Based on what you've brought me, there is strong evidence that BrightPath failed to meet that disclosure obligation across the 3-year period you've documented here. This isn't just a contract violation. This could be a federal violation. My heart rate went up, but I kept my voice level. What else? I said. The verbal renewal, promises made by your representative Greg Paulson. You have dated notes from at least 4 conversations where he used language that reasonably induces an expectation of renewal. Phrases like, when you renew, and your next term. In Georgia, that can constitute implied renewal promise. There's case law on this. And Clause 14.7b, I asked, unilateral termination clauses in franchise agreements are increasingly challenged when combined with evidence of deceptive inducement during the original negotiation. He paused. You know what makes their position even weaker? What? They're doing this to at least 2 franchisees simultaneously. Contracts expiring in the same quarter, in the highest revenue territories. He closed the legal pad. This has the appearance of a coordinated territory recapture strategy. If we can establish a pattern, that changes the entire legal picture. I took a slow breath. I have a franchisee in Birmingham in the exact same situation, I said. Contract expiring in February. Exit offer made in September. Raymond Stokes looked at me for a moment. Ms. Porter, he said, you walked in here with 12 notebooks and an ally in Birmingham. Do you know what that means? That I'm not alone, I said. That they underestimated the wrong person, he said. In the weeks that followed, Raymond started building the case. I kept going to work every single day, greeting my team by name, checking the locations, paying my royalties on time, because any default on my end would give BrightPath grounds to terminate before the contract expired. I wasn't going to hand them that, but at night, I worked with Raymond. The first move was a formal request for a full audit of the Regional Marketing Fund. All 12 years. Raymond sent the notice through proper legal channels, citing the FTC franchise rule by exact clause number. BrightPath had 30 days to respond with complete documentation. The second move was a records request. All communications between corporate and the Southeast Territories over the past 3 years, emails, internal memos, meeting minutes. The third move was the quietest one. Raymond reached out to 6 other BrightPath franchisees in Memphis, Savannah, Jacksonville, Columbia, Raleigh, and Richmond. Franchisees whose contracts were expiring between 2025 and 2026. All of them in high-performing territories. Every single one had received some version of the same conversation in the past 18 months. This wasn't 2 cases. It was 8. The marketing fund audit response arrived 15 days later. Raymond called me the afternoon the package came in. Lynn, they sent the reports. And, I said, I was at the second location. Voice low so my team wouldn't hear. The reports show fund application across 4 major campaigns between 2019 and 2022. But there's a problem. He paused. 2 of those campaigns ran exclusively in northeastern markets, New York and Boston. 0 coverage in the Southeast. The silence between us lasted 3 full seconds. They used my money to fund campaigns in markets where I don't operate, I said. Yours and Patrice's, and at least 3 other Southeast franchisees were mapping. Raymond, I said, how long until their annual convention? BrightPath held its franchisee convention every March in Nashville. Results, announcements, awards. My contract expired in March of 2025. 10 weeks, he said. Then we have 10 weeks, I said. I hung up, walked to the bathroom of the second location, closed the door, put my hands on the sink, and looked at myself in the mirror. 43 employees. Dennis, 12 years. 10 weeks. End of part 2. 8 franchisees. Marketing funds diverted to states where none of us operated. And an annual convention 10 weeks away. where BrightPath planned to announce their new direct operations strategy, not knowing that Lynn Porter already had the framework built. In Part 3, what Raymond found inside the documents BrightPath never should have sent, and the phone call Dennis received on a Thursday morning that almost changed everything. January 2025, 8 weeks to the convention. Raymond called me on a Monday morning at 7:40. I was in the van heading to the third location. His voice had something different in it. Not urgency exactly. More like density. The tone of someone who just opened a box that changes the weight of everything. "Lynn, do you have 15 minutes right now?" "I do," I said. I pulled the van to the shoulder. The internal documents they sent in response to our records request. They included a PowerPoint presentation by mistake, an internal slide deck, dated August of 2024. August of 2024, 2 months before Sandra Keel called me to schedule the Nashville meeting. "What's in it?" I said. "The whole plan," he said. "They call it Project Cornerstone. Recapture of the 12 highest performing territories in the Southeast and Midwest by end of 2025. Projected margin increase of 34% through elimination of franchisee royalty payments. And Lynn, there's a list of priority territories." He paused. "Yours is number 2. I sat there looking out the windshield, at nothing in particular. "They planned this in August," I said, "and called me in October, pretending it was a conversation about renewal." "There's more," Raymond said. "There's a slide with a legal risk analysis. They assess the likelihood of franchisee pushback. Their internal evaluation reads, low litigation risk. Franchisees typically lack resources and legal sophistication for sustained dispute. Low litigation risk. Franchisees typically lack resources and legal sophistication for sustained dispute. I closed my eyes for 3 full seconds. "They bet we wouldn't fight," I said. "They did," Raymond said. "Then let's show them what they bet against," I said. With Project Cornerstone in hand, the case changed shape entirely. This was no longer just a contract dispute about territory renewal. We now had evidence of a coordinated strategy. Executed with asymmetric information, they knew exactly what they were planning. We had no idea. Raymond built the legal structure in 3 layers. The first layer was the FTC franchise rule violation. The documented diversion of regional marketing funds to markets outside franchisee territories. This carried federal exposure, not just civil litigation, potential regulatory investigation. The second layer was the implied renewal doctrine. Greg Paulson's verbal promises about preferential renewal, documented in the notebooks, corroborated by emails where he used phrases like, "when you renew," and "your next term." In Georgia, that created a legitimate expectation of renewal. The third layer was the most powerful and the most quiet. All 8 franchisees signed coordination agreements. We would not litigate individually. We would move as a block. Combined, our territories represented 18% of BrightPath's national revenue, 18% of a mid-sized company's revenue. Threatened by simultaneous federal litigation across 8 states. That was the framework. In the second week of January, Patrice Dawson drove from Birmingham to Atlanta. She arrived on a Friday afternoon with a file of documents as organized as mine. We sat at this kitchen table, Raymond on the laptop by video call, and spent 4 hours going through every piece. Patrice had 12 locations in and around Birmingham, 48 employees, 16 years in the network, 4 more than me. When Raymond walked her through Project Cornerstone, she went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "They told me I was the most important franchisee in Alabama. That BrightPath wouldn't be what it is without people like me." "They say that to all of us," I said. "I know," she said. But when you hear it for 16 years, you start to believe it means something. Dennis brought coffee without being asked, set the cups on the table, and left the room without a word. He always knew when the space belonged to whoever was working in it. Patrice looked at the doorway where he'd gone. "You're lucky," she said. "I know," I said, and I meant it in a way that hurt a little. It was the 3rd week of January. Dennis had been home that morning. He'd had a routine doctor's appointment, blood pressure check, nothing serious. I was at the 4th location when his cell phone rang. Nashville number, Bright Path Corporate. It wasn't Sandra Keel. It was Greg Paulson. Dennis told me that evening, sitting in that chair, hands folded on the table, the way he does when he's choosing his words carefully. He was very pleasant. Dennis said, asked how I was doing, said he understood the situation was difficult, that he knew there was a lot of money on the line. I waited. Then he said, "Dennis, between us, man to man, Bright Path wants to resolve this the friendly way. But if Lynn keeps going down the road she's on, things are going to get complicated. Contracts have compliance clauses that can be triggered. That could affect operations before the expiration date. It would be a shame for the employees." The kitchen was completely silent. "He called you," I said. "Not me." "To intimidate you through me," Dennis said. "To get me to ask you to stop." I looked at him. He looked at me. "What did you say?" I asked. Dennis unfolded his hands, straightened his back. I said, "Greg, I spent 22 years loading boxes for other people's companies. My wife built something of her own from the ground up. If you think I'm going to ask her to stand down right now, you don't know me, and you don't know her. Good afternoon." I couldn't speak for a moment. I got up from my chair, went and stood next to him. Didn't know exactly what to do with what I was feeling. He put his hand on mine. "They can try to intimidate me all they want," he said. "It won't work." I called Raymond that night and told him about the call. He was quiet for 3 seconds. "That has a name," he said. "Contact intimidation through a third party. It's documentable, and it adds another layer to the case." "Add it," I said. 6 weeks before the convention, Raymond made the first visible move. A formal letter was sent simultaneously to Bright Path corporate headquarters and their legal counsel, signed by attorneys representing all 8 coordinated franchisees. The letter notified Bright Path of 3 things. First, the 8 franchisees had documented evidence of FTC franchise rule violations related to the diversion of regional marketing funds and had filed a preliminary notification with the FTC. Not a formal complaint yet, a notification, enough to create a federal record. Second, the 8 franchisees formally contested any non-renewal or territory termination based on violation of the implied renewal doctrine, supported by documented communications from Bright Path representatives. Third, the 8 franchisees would be present at the March annual convention, as they had every contractual right to be, while their agreements remained active, and expected a formal response from Bright Path leadership before the event began. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. On Thursday, Raymond's phone rang 3 times. Bright Path's legal counsel, Sandra Keel personally, and Greg Paulson. Raymond didn't answer any of them. He let the entire weekend pass. On Monday morning, he called them back. "They want a meeting before the convention," he told me. "Where?" I asked. "Atlanta. They proposed our ground because they know we won't go to Nashville." "What date?" I asked. 2 weeks before the convention." I ran the calculation in my head. That gave me 2 weeks of margin before Bright Path announced Project Cornerstone to their entire franchisee network at the convention. "Raymond," I said, "I want all 7 other franchisees in that room." "All 8 present," he said. Sandra Keel walked into that room in Nashville. Thinking I was alone, I said, I want her to walk into the next room, knowing exactly how many people she's dealing with. It was Sunday night before the meeting. Dennis and I washed the dishes together after dinner. The way we've done it for 24 years. He washes, I dry. At some point he said, "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I said, "but the right kind of nervous." "What's the right kind?" "Nervous like someone who prepared everything they could prepare and now just has to show up," I said. He handed me the next wet dish without saying anything. Then he said, "You know what I think every time someone asks me? How you managed to build 7 locations from nothing. What? That they never saw you cleaning a bathroom at 11 o'clock at night with your hands raw. If they had, they never would have underestimated you." I dried the last dish, put it in the cabinet, went to bed at 10, woke up at 4:30 without an alarm. Old habit, 8 franchisees. A slide deck BrightPath never should have sent. A letter that made 3 executives call the same day. And a meeting scheduled in Atlanta where Sandra Keel was finally going to find out who she was dealing with. In part 4, what happened in that room, and what Lynn Porter said at the annual convention that no BrightPath franchisee will ever forget. The Atlanta meeting was set for a Tuesday in February, 10 o'clock in the morning. Raymond had reserved the conference room at his Midtown office. 10th floor, view of Piedmont Park. Table for 12, 8 chairs on our side, 4 on theirs. I arrived at 9:15. Patrice arrived from Birmingham at 9:28. The other 6 franchisees came from Memphis, Savannah, Jacksonville, Columbia, Raleigh, and Richmond. Some drove, 2 flew. Not one of them missed it. We had coffee together in the hallway before going in. Nobody needed to make a speech. We looked at each other, and the thing in each person's eyes was the same thing. I built this from nothing too. I put everything into this too. I am not walking away empty-handed. At 10 o'clock sharp, Sandra Keel came through the door with Trevor Hollis and 2 outside counsel I didn't recognize. She saw all 8 of us sitting across that table for half a second, just half a second. Her face lost its composure. Then she sat down, opened her folder, and said, "Good morning, everyone." Raymond spoke first. 20 minutes, never once raised his voice. He walked through all 3 layers of the case. The FTC franchise rule violation, with 12 years of documentation, the implied renewal doctrine, supported by emails and dated notes, and Project Cornerstone. The internal slide deck that BrightPath had included in their own document response by mistake. When he slid the printed copy of that deck across the table toward Trevor Hollis, the outside counsel, sitting next to Trevor, closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. He knew what it was. He knew what had happened. Raymond kept going. "Our clients are not here to destroy BrightPath. They are here to receive what is fair in exchange for what they built. What we are proposing is the following." He placed a second document on the table. 4 terms: clean, direct, no room for interpretation. 1. Renewal of all 8 territory contracts for a minimum of 10 years, with a guaranteed right of first refusal on the following renewal. 2. An independent audit of all regional marketing funds for the past 12 years, with proportional restitution of any amounts applied outside the corresponding franchisee territories. 3. Renegotiation of Clause 14.7b across all active network contracts. Not just the 8. The clause would be replaced with language requiring fair market compensation in any territory recapture process. 4. A formal letter from BrightPath acknowledging the historical contribution of the territories developed by all 8 franchisees. For the franchisees to use however they chose. Sandra Keel listened to every word. When Raymond finished, She looked at the papers in front of her for a long time. Then she looked at me. Not at Raymond, at me. "Ms. Porter," she said, "is there anything you'd like to add?" I had been waiting for that. "One thing," I said. "In the Project Cornerstone slides, your legal risk assessment described franchisees as typically lacking the resources and legal sophistication for a sustained dispute." I paused. "I want you to know that assessment was wrong, and if Brightpath's policy toward high-performing territories doesn't change, the next group of franchisees will have access to everything we've documented here as precedent, including the slide deck." The silence held for 10 full seconds. Trevor Hollis leaned over and said something quietly into Sandra's ear. Sandra closed her folder. "We need 48 hours, she said. "You have 24, Raymond said. "The convention is in 2 weeks. Raymond called me at 8 the next morning. "They accepted all 4 terms," he said. I was in the van. I pulled to the shoulder for the second time in 2 months. "All 4, I said. "All 4. With one addendum, they propose that I recommend you accept. The marketing audit will be conducted by an independent firm, chosen jointly, not by Brightpath alone. The findings will be binding. And Clause 14.7b for the whole network. Confirmed. They'll present it at the convention as a strategic partnership policy update." I almost laughed. "They're going to present it like it was their idea," I said. "Lynn," Raymond said, and there was something close to amusement in his voice. "Let them have the narrative. You get the territories, the audit, the clause changed for the entire network, and 10 years of guaranteed contract. Which matters more?" He was right. "When do we sign?" I asked. "Friday. Their Nashville office. You and the other 7. "I'll be there," I said. I hung up, sat in the van for a full minute. Then I called Dennis. He picked up on the first ring. "How did it go?" he said. "They accepted everything," I said. His silence lasted 3 seconds. And then I heard something Dennis Porter almost never does. He cried, not loudly, not dramatically. The kind of crying that happens when someone has been holding an enormous amount of weight for a very long time and can finally set a little of it down. I stayed on the line listening to him, hand on the steering wheel, looking at the asphalt of I-400 North stretching out ahead of me. "Dennis," I said, "is the champagne still in the fridge?" He laughed through the tears. "Since 2013, he said. "We drove to Nashville on Friday." Dennis drove. I sat in the passenger seat with the folder in my lap. 3.5 hours. We were quiet for most of it. The way people who have known each other a long time are quiet. Not because there's nothing to say, because some things don't need words. Somewhere around the Tennessee state line, Dennis said, "You know what makes me most proud out of all of this?" "What?" "That you never once stood down. Not even when they called me trying to fold you from the inside." I looked at the road ahead. "I almost did," I said, "the night I first read Clause 14.7b. For about 5 minutes I thought, maybe 92,000 is enough. Maybe it's not worth the fight." "What changed your mind?" "You," I said. "You put $188,000 of your retirement into this without blinking. I couldn't take 92 back and call it done." He didn't answer. He put his hand on my knee for a moment. We kept driving. The signing took 40 minutes. 8 franchisees around the table. Sandra Keel across from us. Trevor Hollis beside her. Cordial, professional. The kind of cordial that exists after someone realizes they have no good options left. When I signed my copy, I folded it and placed it in my folder. No speech, no smile towards Sandra Keel. I just put the paper away, because that was what I had come to get. The Brightpath Annual Convention, was held at a conference hotel in Nashville. 570 franchisees from 32 states. We arrived, all 8 of us, and sat together in the 5th row. Not the front, not the back, the 5th row where everyone could see us and we could see everything. Sandra Keel gave the morning presentation, year-end results, growth projections, new market announcements, and then she reached the partnership policy slide. We are announcing today a significant update to our territory agreements, she said. Clause 14.7b, which previously allowed for unilateral territory renegotiation, will be replaced across all active and future contracts with language guaranteeing fair market compensation in any recapture process. This change reflects our commitment to long-term partnerships. A murmur moved through the room, franchisees looking at each other, some taking notes, some pulling out their phones. A woman 3 rows behind me leaned toward her husband and said, "Loud enough for me to hear." "That's huge. That changes everything." Yes, it did. Because that clause now protected 570 franchisees, not just the 8 who had fought for it. Patrice was sitting next to me. She found my hand under the armrest and squeezed once. Quick, without looking at me. I squeezed back. During the lunch break, I was in the hallway getting coffee when Sandra Keel appeared beside me. No assistants, no counsel, just her. We stood there for a moment, side by side, looking out at the corridor. "Ms. Porter," she said quietly, "I want you to know that what happened wasn't personal." I held my coffee cup with both hands. "Sandra," I said, equally quiet, $188,000 of my husband's retirement savings, 43 employees who depend on my locations to make rent, 12 years of royalties paid on time, every single month, without 1 week of delay. I paused. For me, it was very personal. She didn't respond. After a moment, she picked up her coffee and walked back down the corridor. I stayed where I was, drank my coffee. Outside, Atlanta was 3.5 hours away. Dennis was at home. Maria Santos was opening the second location with the morning crew. 43 people were starting their workday, not knowing what had happened over the past several weeks, to make sure that day, and the next 10 years of days, were going to be possible. They didn't need to know. That weight was mine. And I had learned, in 12 years of early mornings and late nights and bathrooms cleaned with raw hands, that some weight you carry alone, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to. It's March of 2025 now. Atlanta. I'm sitting at this table. The same one where I signed the original contract. The same one where I read Clause 14.7b for the first time with cold hands. The same one where Patrice and I spent 4 hours building the case with Raymond on the laptop screen. Dennis is in the living room watching the game. The 2013 champagne was finally opened last Friday, after the signing in Nashville. It was bad. Cheap champagne kept for 12 years goes bad. We drank it anyway, laughing, standing in the kitchen. The Independent Marketing Fund audit started last week. Raymond estimates the proportional restitution across the 8 territories will land somewhere between $260,000 and $340,000 total, divided proportionally by revenue across the years of diversion. It's not a fortune. It won't make me rich, but it is mine. And I learned that fighting for what is yours, for what you built with your own hands, with the money of the man who believed in you, that is not stubbornness. That is the only acceptable answer. The 12 black notebooks are on the shelf in the home office. I'm not throwing them away. The 13th one starts tomorrow.